The billionaire had spent 22 years believing that one person in the world was dead. He had stopped searching for her long ago, buried the memories beneath money, boardrooms, private jets, and a life so powerful that almost nobody dared tell him no. But on an ordinary summer afternoon, inside a small neighborhood restaurant, a young waitress glanced at the ring on his finger and quietly said, "Sir, my mother has a ring exactly like yours." The billionaire's hand stopped halfway to his coffee. His face went pale, because that ring was not jewelry. It was the last thing his missing wife had ever given him before she disappeared without a trace. Before we uncover what happened that afternoon, if you believe kindness can change someone's life and that people deserve second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Life Spark Stories. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. Now, let's return to the moment that changed everything. His name was Everett Calder, a 60-year-old billionaire whose name appeared on skyscrapers, technology companies, luxury hotels, and charitable foundations across the country. From the outside, Everett seemed to have everything. His home stood on a hill overlooking the city, his garage held cars most people only saw in magazines, and his schedule was filled with meetings that could move millions of dollars with a single signature. But wealth had never been able to buy him the one thing he wanted most. 22 years earlier, his wife, Marisol, had disappeared on a rainy evening after leaving their home. Her car was later found abandoned near a highway, but she was never found. There was no body, no confirmed death, and no explanation. Everett spent years hearing investigators, searching hospitals, checking records, and following every possible lead until eventually everyone around him told him to accept the truth. But Everett never truly did. He simply learned how to live with the empty chair at his dinner table. That afternoon, he had stopped at a modest family restaurant called Willow and Grain because his driver was delayed and he wanted somewhere quiet to wait. The restaurant was bright with natural afternoon sunlight, its large windows open toward a busy street filled with pedestrians and bicycles. Nothing about the place looked luxurious, and that was exactly why Everett liked it. He sat alone near the window, wearing a simple navy jacket, while a young waitress named Sarah Bennett brought him coffee and a plate of food. Sarah was 24, hardworking, observant, and carrying the quiet exhaustion of someone who had been responsible for her family for far too long. She had grown up with her mother in a small apartment, watching her mother work multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. Sarah had never known her father. Her mother had always told her that he was gone, and that some questions were better left unanswered. When Sarah returned to refill Everett's coffee, her eyes fell on the silver ring around his finger. It was simple, old-fashioned, and engraved with a tiny blue stone. Something about it made her stop. She stared at it for several seconds before nervously saying that her mother had a ring just like it. Everett looked up so quickly that the movement startled her. He asked what her mother's name was, and Sarah answered, Marisol Bennett. The room seemed to disappear around him. Everett could hear his own heartbeat. He asked where her mother was, and Sarah explained that she was at home recovering from an illness and had been living quietly for years. Everett's fingers trembled as he looked at the ring. He told Sarah that his wife had owned a matching ring and that her name had been Marisol Calder. Sarah immediately noticed the terror in his expression and assumed she had somehow caused trouble. But Everett reached into his wallet and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a much younger man standing beside a smiling woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Sarah stared at the photograph, then covered her mouth. The woman in the picture was her mother. She had seen that same face in childhood photographs, but there was one thing she had never understood. Her mother had always refused to explain why she kept an old photograph hidden inside a wooden box. Now, she finally understood that the missing pieces of her life were sitting across from her. Everett could barely breathe when he realized the truth. Sarah was not simply the daughter of a woman who looked like his missing wife. She was his daughter, the child Marisol had been carrying when she disappeared. 22 years earlier, Marisol had discovered that she was pregnant. Around the same time, Everett's business was facing a dangerous internal battle. One of his senior partners had been secretly stealing company funds and threatening Marisol because she had discovered evidence against him. Everett had never known the full danger she was facing. On the night she disappeared, Marisol had been trying to protect both Everett and their unborn child. She had been told that if she stayed, their family would be destroyed. She disappeared believing it was the only way to keep them alive. But the story became even more painful when Saria explained that her mother had never intended to stay away forever. Years later, Marisol had tried to contact Everett, but the letters never reached him. The old business partner had intercepted them, terrified that Marisol would expose him. By the time the truth began coming out, Marisol had already built a quiet life far away. She had raised Saria alone, carrying the weight of the past without allowing bitterness to consume her. She had told Saria that her father was a good man who probably believed they were gone forever. She never wanted her daughter to hate him for something he had never done. Everett immediately left the restaurant with Saria. They drove through bright afternoon streets toward the small home where Marisol lived. For the first time in decades, Everett felt something stronger than grief. He felt hope, but it frightened him because hope meant he could still lose her again. When the front door opened, an older woman stood there holding a small silver ring in her hand. She looked at Everett, and for several seconds neither of them moved. 22 years of questions stood between them. Marisol finally whispered his name, and Everett's eyes filled with tears. He did not ask why she had left. He did not accuse her. He simply told her that he had spent 22 years wondering whether she was alive. Marisol looked at him and explained everything, including the threats, the intercepted letters, the fear, and the years she spent believing that staying hidden was the only way to protect their daughter. Everett realized that both of them had been victims of the same deception. They had lost 2 decades not because they stopped loving each other, but because someone had deliberately kept them apart. Then Everett turned toward Saria. He had imagined meeting his child thousands of times, but never imagined she would arrive carrying a coffee pot and wearing a restaurant uniform. He told her that he could never replace the years he had missed, but if she allowed him, he wanted to spend the rest of his life earning the chance to be her father. Saria cried as she told him that she did not need his money, his companies, or his mansion. She only wanted to know why he had never come looking for her. Everett answered honestly that he had searched for her every day until someone convinced him there was nothing left to find. Weeks passed, and the 3 of them slowly began rebuilding what had been broken. Everett helped Marisol receive proper medical care, but he never tried to control her life. He introduced Saria to his world, but he also spent time learning about hers. He discovered that she loved photography, hated expensive restaurants, and dreamed of opening a small cafe where young people could find work without needing connections. Instead of buying her a business and handing her the keys, Everett quietly helped her create a plan and encouraged her to build it herself. For the first time, he understood that being a father was not about giving someone everything. It was about showing up. 1 year later, Saria opened her own cafe. Marisol sat near the front window on opening day, smiling as customers filled the room. Everett stood behind the counter wearing an apron that looked completely out of place on a billionaire. Nobody in the cafe cared about his fortune. To them, he was simply a father who had finally found his daughter, and a husband who had been given a second chance. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Life Spark Stories. Sometimes one small act of kindness, one honest question, or one unexpected conversation can open a door that seemed closed forever. And before we end, make a special commitment today. Promise yourself that if someone you love needs a second chance, you will choose kindness before judgment. Because you never know what pain is hiding behind someone's silence.